He never loved you the way he loved this family. My brother said it quietly, almost gently, like he was doing me a favor by finally saying it out loud. He was sitting across from me at the notary's table, hands folded, wearing the same grey blazer he always wore to anything he considered important. The notary looked down at her papers. My father's estate lawyer cleared his throat. Nobody in that room looked at me directly, except my brother, who never stopped. I had driven 4 hours from Ottawa to get to that office in Sudbury on a Tuesday morning in November, the kind of cold that makes your car creak. I remember the Tim Hortons cup still sitting in my cup holder, half finished, lid peeled back. I remember thinking, on the highway somewhere past Parry Sound, that I should have done this sooner, that I had waited too long for reasons I didn't fully understand yet. My name is Connor Webb. I'm 38 years old. I work as a senior auditor for a mid-size accounting firm, and for most of my adult life, the person I trusted least with numbers was my own brother. He is 4 years older than me. Our father passed away 14 months before that Tuesday in November, after a long illness that none of us handled particularly well. Our mother had died when I was 12. After that, our father raised us both, with our uncle's help on weekends, and a kind of quiet stubbornness that I came to understand only after he was gone. My brother had been managing our father's finances for the last 3 years of his life. Dad's hands had gotten bad, arthritis, then a small stroke that affected his right side, and my brother had stepped in. It seemed reasonable at the time. He lived 40 minutes away from our father. I was in Ottawa. He handled the bills, drove Dad to appointments, dealt with the bank. Everyone in our extended family spoke about it the way people speak about sacrifice. Like it was obvious, like it cost him something, like I should have been grateful. I was grateful for a while. The first time something felt wrong, I didn't let myself think about it clearly. It was at Christmas, about 2 years before Dad died. We were at my uncle's place just outside Sudbury, same house we'd gone to since we were kids. My father mentioned offhandedly that he'd had to move some money around. To keep things simpler, he said. He smiled when he said it. But the smile didn't reach his eyes, and my father had never been a man who said things were simple when they weren't. I asked him later, when my brother had gone outside to start his truck. Dad looked at the kitchen table and said it was nothing. Your brother handles all that now. I let it go. I told myself it was the illness, the fatigue, the way people's minds blur around the edges when they've been unwell for too long. But I started paying attention after that, not obsessively. I wasn't recording phone calls or photographing documents. I was just paying attention. At family dinners, when conversations drifted toward money, or the property, or what would happen eventually, my brother had a habit of changing the subject with something that sounded reasonable. A joke, usually, or a practical concern. The drive home, someone's kid needing to leave. It was smooth enough that nobody noticed. I noticed because I do it too. When I'm redirecting a client audit, I don't want to answer questions about yet. I noticed because I know exactly what it looks like when someone is managing what other people are allowed to find out. Our father owned 2 things of real value: the house in Sudbury where we grew up, and a small portfolio of registered savings and GECs that he'd been building since the 70s. He was a machinist for 30 years. He didn't spend extravagantly. He saved carefully, the way his generation did, and he was proud of it in the quiet way he was proud of most things. He didn't say much, but you could tell by the way he kept the paperwork organized in the same blue binder, on the same shelf, in the same spot in his office. When I flew back to Ottawa after Dad's funeral, I asked my brother about the blue binder. He said he'd found it, that it was fine, that he'd handle the estate process and keep me informed. I said I'd like to be involved. He said of course. He didn't keep me informed. He didn't involve me. Months went by. I sent emails that got short replies. I called and was told things were in progress. That probate in Ontario took time, that the lawyer was backed up. All of that was plausible. Probate does take time. Lawyers are backed up. But when I contacted the estate lawyer's office directly, not through my brother directly, I discovered that the process was further along than I'd been told. Significantly further along. That was the moment I stopped being politely patient. I didn't call my brother. I thought about it, considered it, and decided against it. For the same reason I wouldn't call a client to tell them I'd found a discrepancy before I'd finished tracing it. You don't show your cards to the person you're investigating. Not until you know exactly what you're looking at. Instead, I requested copies of documents I was legally entitled to as a named beneficiary. The will had been filed. I got a copy. I went through it line by line. My father had been clear. The estate was to be divided equally between us, with the family home either sold and proceeds split, or bought out at fair market value by one party if agreed upon. There were no surprises in the language. It was exactly what I would have expected from a careful, straightforward man. What surprised me was what was no longer in the estate when I started tracing the assets. The GSE portfolio had been partially liquidated. 2 of the accounts had been transferred or closed in the 18 months before my father died, during a period when he was legally competent, which meant my brother had obtained his signature. The property had a line of credit opened against it that hadn't existed before. Not a large one, but it hadn't been there 3 years ago, and it had been drawn upon. None of this was necessarily fraud. Some of it could have been legitimate expenses. My father had medical costs. The house needed work. There were plausible explanations for individual transactions, but the pattern, the direction of the money, the timing, the fact that I hadn't been told any of it, that wasn't explainable by coincidence. I hired an estate litigation lawyer in Ottawa. I didn't tell anyone in the family. Then I hired a forensic accountant. He was methodical and unsentimental about it, which is exactly what I needed. Over the following 3 months, he reviewed every document I could legally obtain: bank records, property filings, account statements, the registered account paperwork, and produced a report that laid out the timeline with a kind of clarity that makes your stomach drop. Not because it's shocking, but because it's precise. Approximately $62,000 had moved in ways that were inconsistent with my father's known expenses, and inconsistent with his stated wishes. Some of it was traceable directly to my brother's own accounts. Some of it was less clear, cash withdrawals, third-party transactions, but the overall picture was unambiguous to anyone who knew how to read it. During all of this, my brother called me occasionally. Normal calls, the kind you have when you're trying to seem like everything is fine. He mentioned that the house had been appraised, that probate was almost done, that he thought we should talk about next steps. I was cordial. I answered his questions. I didn't volunteer anything. He took my silence for resignation. He thought I was the younger brother who had always let things go. He thought I would accept whatever number he presented at the end of the process and be quietly grateful for the portion I was given. That was, I think, his biggest miscalculation. There's something particular about being underestimated by someone who has known you your entire life. It's different from being underestimated by a stranger. A stranger doesn't know what they're missing. My brother had watched me grow up. He'd watched me study, struggle, build a career. He'd sat across from me at 20 years of family dinners, and he had still decided that I was the one who wouldn't look too closely, who wouldn't push back, who would fold when it counted. I don't say that with bitterness. I understand it, actually. In our family, I had always been the quiet one. My brother was louder, more confident in rooms full of people, better at the social performance of being fine. I had spent so long being the one who absorbed things without reacting that I'd apparently convinced him it was a permanent condition. It wasn't a condition. It was a strategy, and it had given me 14 months of uninterrupted time to build a case he hadn't seen coming. The meeting at the notary's office was his idea, actually. He'd proposed it as a settlement discussion, a way to finalize the estate without prolonged legal proceedings. He brought his own lawyer. He had a proposal prepared, a document that offered me a fixed buyout amount for my share of the estate. The number was lower than it should have been by a meaningful margin. I brought my estate lawyer and the forensic accountant's full report. I let him go first. His lawyer presented the proposal, explained the rationale, framed it as an efficient and fair resolution. My brother sat back in his chair looking like someone who believed the meeting was already over. Then my lawyer slid a copy of the forensic accounting report across the table. The notary, to her credit, kept her face completely neutral. My brother's lawyer picked up the report and started reading. My brother looked at it without touching it. He never loved you the way he loved this family. That's what he said when he finally spoke about 20 minutes later. Not a rebuttal, not a denial. That. Like if he could make me feel small enough, I might fold the report back up and let it go. I thought about my father, the blue binder on the shelf, 30 years of careful saving. The way he'd shaken my hand when I got my designation. Not a hug, a handshake, firm and sincere, because that was how he expressed things he meant. I said, I don't think that's relevant to the financial records. The next 2 months were not easy. My brother's lawyer pivoted to contesting the methodology of the forensic report, which is a standard response and not entirely without basis. There were a few transactions that genuinely could have been interpreted differently. My lawyer anticipated this. The report had been prepared precisely to withstand it, with sourcing and documentation at every step. What my brother hadn't anticipated was the bank's own compliance department. When an estate dispute of this nature involves liquidated registered accounts and a line of credit, there are notifications. There are records at the institution level that don't depend on either party's interpretation. When those records were subpoenaed as part of the proceeding, they corroborated the forensic report in every material respect. His lawyer called my lawyer 2 weeks after the subpoena. The settlement that followed was not dramatic. There were no scenes, no confessions, no moment in front of witnesses where everything was laid bare in a single confrontation. That's not how these things work, and honestly, I think I'd been prepared for that. I'd spent enough time in audits to know that resolution almost never looks like a movie. It looks like paperwork. It looks like a number on a wire transfer confirmation and an agreement signed by both parties that neither discusses publicly. I received my full share of the estate, plus a portion of what had been redirected during my father's lifetime. Not everything. Some of it was genuinely impossible to trace cleanly enough, and fighting it further would have cost more than it recovered. My lawyer was honest with me about that. I accepted it. What I didn't accept was the version of events my brother had been quietly circulating to our extended family in the weeks before the settlement. The story he'd told was that I had made unreasonable demands, that I was dragging out the process out of resentment, that the delay was my fault. A couple of aunts and cousins had called me during that period, concerned, gentle, clearly having heard something that positioned me as the difficult one. I hadn't corrected them at the time. After the settlement, I did, not with drama, just with facts, the same way the forensic accountant had laid them out, calmly and in order. Some of those relationships recovered. Some didn't. My uncle, my father's brother, called me a week after I explained everything to him. He was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then he said, "Your dad worked his whole life for that." He didn't say anything else about it, but he didn't need to. My brother and I have spoken twice since the settlement. Both times were brief and logistical. The sale of the family home required some coordination. We were civil. There was nothing to say that the documents hadn't already said. I don't hate him. I'm not sure what I feel exactly. Something adjacent to grief maybe, the kind that doesn't have a clean category. What I know is this. For a long time, I measured myself by the story my brother told about me. The younger one who stayed out of things. The one who moved away and let others carry the weight. The one who wouldn't know what to do with himself if it came down to something real. I had let that story live in me longer than I should have, had let it shape the way I moved through rooms and conversations and decisions that mattered. The settlement didn't fix that. What fixed it, slowly, was the process of doing the work. Requesting the documents, reading them, finding a lawyer I trusted, being honest with the forensic accountant about what I knew and what I suspected, and letting the evidence take me wherever it actually led, even when some of what it led to was uncomfortable for me too. I had never thought of myself as someone who fought for things. I had always been more comfortable with the long view, with patience, with letting situations resolve on their own timeline. What I learned, in those 14 months, was that patience and passivity are not the same thing. One of them means you're waiting for the right moment. The other means you've already given up. My father's blue binder is in my apartment now. I kept it after the house sold. It's on a shelf in my office, still organized the way he kept it. Tabs for each account, dates written in his handwriting, everything in order. I don't look at it often. I don't need to. But I'm glad it's there. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes after something is finally resolved. Not happiness, exactly, though there's some of that. More like the end of a low noise you'd stop noticing, because it had been there so long. The absence of it feels strange at first, then it feels like breathing normally. I grew up in a house where things were not said directly, where difficulty was absorbed quietly, and where making trouble was worse, in some unspoken calculus, than being wronged. I learned those rules early and I followed them for a long time, even when following them cost me things I shouldn't have let go. I don't follow them anymore. Not because I became a different person. I'm still the one who drives 4 hours alone and drinks coffee that's gone cold and doesn't say much in rooms full of people. But I understand now that staying quiet is a choice, and that choices have consequences either way. Staying quiet while someone takes what was never theirs is not peace. It is just a slower way of losing. My father was a machinist. He measured things carefully. He knew that a part that looks fine from the outside can be out of tolerance by fractions that matter enormously. He knew that you check the work, not because you distrust the person, but because that's what it means to do the job properly. I am his son. I should have remembered that sooner. But I remembered it eventually, and when it counted, I measured everything.